Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today with the impact ecosystem in Spain and to be working with the Spain National Advisory Board again. This is a very special event, the Impact Journey, Together Towards a New Era, celebrating the second anniversary of Spain joining the GSG, and I'm delighted to be part of it. I've been asked to speak about the need to reimagine capitalism, to drive systemic change so we can create a system that works for all, an inclusive system, a sustainable economic system that leads to growth and shared prosperity. Fundamentally, what we want is a market and a society that works for all people. If you are attending this event, you don't need me to tell you that our current economic system does not work for everyone, and some people doubt that it ever will. The past year has made those systemic disparities even more pronounced. The coronavirus pandemic has challenged the global community in unprecedented ways. And unfortunately, more than a year later, it is still not close to ending in many parts of the world. The COVID health crisis prompted a broader economic and social crisis that exposed some of our most troubling systemic frailties. The very engine of capitalism, its workers, seemed to get the short end of the stick again. Millions were laid off the moment the crisis struck. The most essential workers of the crisis, like delivery people and grocery store clerks, labor under difficult circumstances and survive at the lowest end of the pay scale. If compensation reflects value, then our system clearly does not value these workers much at all. Meanwhile, many of the world's biggest companies and their shareholders enjoyed record profits during this year of upheaval. Now, as we work to end the pandemic, new questions of inclusion are rising. Plans for vaccine distribution have been inconsistent almost everywhere. But it is already clear that the residents of the world's wealthier countries have gained access to vaccines long before residents of poor countries. Without that access, UN leaders say COVID will continue widening global inequality. Of course, the pandemic has not been happening in a vacuum. Across the United States, Europe, and beyond, last year brought widespread civil unrest and racial justice demonstrations. Insufficient progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals is prompting real and reasonable doubt about whether the goals can be achieved by our 2030 target. At the same time, the climate emergency is threatening lives in other ways. Despite re-entering the Paris Climate Accord, the United States is still not on track to meet the Accord's commitments, and neither is any other major developed economy. Meanwhile, an epidemic of misinformation and widespread mistrust is hitting important institutions around the world, from business to government, and it is leaving them greatly diminished faith among much of the public. These are global, intersectional, systemic problems. To address them successfully, we need global systemic change. If this year of upheaval has had any silver lining, it is this. Crisis has opened our eyes to this unprecedented opportunity for lasting change. One of my favorite quotes from the year came from author and political activist Arundhati Roy. She described the pandemic and all that came with it as, quote, a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. It offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves, she says. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Roy is absolutely correct. We do need a next normal, and we can achieve the future we're talking about here today. But to do it, both mindsets and actions must shift. We must come to see inclusion as essential and foundational to growth. We must design inclusivity into our next economic system. We need to invert the idea that growth comes first, and then only once we're growing do we ask, how can we be more inclusive? That's the old normal. The next normal will recognize that inclusion never takes root as an optional, after-the-fact add-on. The next normal will demonstrate that inclusivity is the foundation upon which the most widespread economic growth can occur. Impact investors will need to be thinking and asking about inclusion at multiple levels. It's not simply who's in leadership or is the board diverse. It must be who are the owners, who is employed, who gets economic opportunity, and who is served by these products and services. But if we are truly building a market and a society that includes all people, the change must be even broader. Our ways of understanding economic growth must evolve. The old normal simply tells us to look at a nation's gross domestic product or the stock prices on its exchanges. But the next normal will not be tracking that growth only in dollars, yen, or euros. The next normal will be thinking of equity, of social progress, of quality of life, of well-being. In that reimagined future, we will measure economic growth by looking at our shared prosperity. These are bold ideas, and the depth of the systemic change we need can seem intimidating. But the glimmers of that reimagined future are already showing up in the here and now. That is why we are gathered here today. It is our shared responsibility to reflect those glimmers more broadly. We need to spread these inclusive mindsets and these inclusive actions. And we need to ensure that systemic change they represent becomes the foundation of our next normal. Thank you.